The 2025 selective school exam caught a lot of families off guard. Suddenly, it was online, no spell check, different writing tasks every single day, and even test centers that turned into complete chaos for some students. Some kids even had to retake the test because of all the issues, where I think was pretty unfair for everyone else. But if there's one thing we've all learned from this year's exam, that if the selective process is changing fast and what has worked in 2023 or 2024 or even 2025 may not work anymore in the future. My name is John and I'm the founder of Bing's Academy. For the past 10 years, we have helped students reach their academic goals through online one-on-one tutoring. So in this video, I want to break down the biggest lessons from the 2025 exam, how the new online setup can actually affect people's performance, and we'll surprise us about the writing section, and ultimately what we can do differently for 2026 and beyond to avoid the same mistakes that happened this year. First is online testing. 2025 was the first year that tests were officially online. Students were not prepared in terms of typing or doing their writing online, but ultimately struggled. As there is no spell check available, they will be using laptops provided at each test center. This means for a lot of students who are not used to typing or only used to typing on a tablet or an iPad, this doesn't really translate the best compared to a keyboard, which is provided, to my knowledge, to the majority of test centers along with a mouse. There is no touch typing option available unless there are accessibility issues that need to be taken into consideration. In addition, tests could be done across multiple days depending on the student's preference. However, there are certain questions used again from the same pool of questions for other days. There are inherently different questions included too, but when we factor in the writing in particular, each day had a different text type. So what this means is that the students who did the test on the Saturday had some questions that were the same and also some questions that were different to the students who did it on the Sunday. This is important because students can often remember the writing question the easiest compared to specific questions in other components of the test, such as question 17 for maths, question 20 for thinking skills, or question number 2 for reading. It's just too difficult. It is too challenging in some regards to remember and for them to take advantage of, which is why they have done this, to think of their way to get around it. I get it because not everyone was available to do the test on the same day, which is why they made it across multiple days. But personally, I'm not the biggest fan of how it was currently formatted, as it does not prevent students from sharing their answers of what they remember. It also makes us realize that if a student got a narrative on one day, they might get a newspaper report on another day, to deliberately avoid using the same text type for writing again. So having exposure to the broad spectrum of writing text types is crucial, as you don't know what they'll be given or whether they'll repeat certain questions again. That is why ultimately I think it's important, and I think eventually the selective exam will introduce adaptive testing, which is currently what they do already in the NAPLAN exam. This ensures that they'll have more variety in terms of questions that are provided, and the questions that you get correct, the harder the questions. The more questions you get wrong, the easier questions you receive. And ultimately, it provides the schools more flexibility in terms of students that are actually higher performing compared to everyone having the exact same questions. It does sound logical and may help prevent students sharing potential answers and questions that they remember, because there's more variety when it comes to question types that can even appear in the first place. In some ways, I think this is inevitable that New South Wales will move towards this more data-driven adaptive testing to ensure even more fairness and accuracy in terms of selecting the right students. Another one of my guesses is that there might also be AI-based exams or question variations in the future, which could come up. The reason why I don't foresee this to come up in the short term though, or the next couple of years before 2030, is because a lot of these changes are going to be quite drastic, and they need to have sufficient number of time to prepare and ensure that it's actually an improvement from what they're currently doing. So don't assume practice papers or past papers will remain the same or applicable forever. But in my personal experience of doing this for such a long time, honestly, I think for the short to medium term, those papers will still be invaluable for the next few years. And if it doesn't, I'll be sure to make a video about that. Another takeaway from this year's exams is that the test centers were honestly very chaotic. It was poorly organized at 2 large test centers and impacted hundreds of students. We never know what we can expect in 2026 and beyond, but a key learning is for parents to come earlier and be prepared to ensure that the child is not impacted as much as possible as many were for this year. Clearly, the venues and facilities were not prepared to take on this many students. For the students that were impacted, they even got the opportunity to retake the exam and receive the highest score between the 2 tests that they ended up doing. This is for the test that was impacted by the disruptions, but also the retake exam a few weeks later. I think this was quite controversial, as honestly, it doesn't seem the most fairest approach when other students weren't given the chance to retake the test, and they also had the option to choose the higher score out of either of those 2 exams. I don't personally give the responsibility for the students impacted though. The Department of Education clearly has some plans, but there's a lot they still need to improve on to ensure there's no major mishaps such as the one that occurred this year. An independent review was done, and apparently the students who had the option to do the exam again due to the disruptions at the test centers did not score remarkably that different compared to the other students at other test centers that were not impacted. As a result, they still feel it was fair and a just system. Regardless, it is still a clear lesson for parents and students to take this year as an opportunity to prepare for future incidences that may occur. It also shows the importance of not being too overly emotional, as it can impact the child's ability to perform on the day as well. It is kind of like a natural disaster. If someone you care about or respects breaks down and becomes chaotic, sad, or angry, you will likely follow and mimic their behavior. Although if you are calm and try to be level-headed, they will mimic that behavior as well. Before the exam or even before practice exams, the job of a parent, in my opinion, is to not make them instantly focus, which will give them extra stress, but to make them feel safer during any unexpected or volatile situations. Obviously, no one could foresee what has happened earlier this year, but if the police were called and there were major disruptions there, I believe it is the role of those parents to make sure that they are calm so that the students themselves can mimic their parents' behavior and still be rationally prepared just in case certain things happen and they still have to conduct the exam anyway. Another key takeaway is the technical familiarity with the new setup. Not only was the waiting for writing increased to 25% compared to in 2024 last year, where it was only worth 15%, it is now completely online. Online fatigue is a real issue, and students who are not used to answering questions online on screens will naturally perform worse. As soon as we found out the exam was going to be online and it was confirmed to be online in 2025, our students who did online tutoring with us already didn't really struggle too much with the transition. They're pretty used to concentrating for an hour and a half, 2 hours at a time every week. Students who only did in-person tutoring without much exposure to work or practice on a computer will ultimately feel that it was very different and they might need a bit of a learning curve until they get used to it. I encourage students to replicate test conditions at home, use a laptop with no spell check, do time limits, limit distractions, etc. Being online will have a lot of distractions inherently inbuilt and involved with it, but with the new exam format, this is something they have to be comfortable with and can play a major part in the actual test performance. This also goes for typing speed and accuracy. Accuracy is more important when it comes to writing tasks, when we look at how the marking scheme is done in terms of set A and set B for selective. But if there is not enough quantity for the examiner to mark it off, it is going to be unlikely they're going to score in the top bands. Writing 50 to 100 words is honestly too little in 30 minutes compared to the strongest students who can flesh out an entire response with a good amount of detail. Students who panic type or type very slow end up not doing well in this area, so I would say students must be familiar with the new online setup. As a PSA, we are doing, for any of the students that are preparing for the selective exam next year, we are running the Selective 2026 Horizon program, which is a completely free 10-week program where students would do all 4 exams of the selective test each week. After a successful 2025 this year, we want to make things bigger and better for selective. Scores will still be provided immediately after completing the test, and weekly rankings are provided so you can compare how you did to other students also preparing for the selective test. We will start this from the 6th of February 2026 to the 11th of April 2026. Again, it is free for students in Year 6 who are serious about preparing for the exam, so please only sign up if you can commit to the entire 10 weeks. There is the Horizon Plus option if you wanted copies of the questions, detailed writing feedback, etc. for an added fee on top. But honestly, this is just an optional add-on. It's not required. As it is a free program though, students who don't do the test each and every week will be kicked off the program so we can save a spot for someone else who can dedicate the entire duration. This is for the Year 7 entry exams, so only designed for Year 6 next year. If you're in Year 4 or Year 3, this would not be suitable. You just wait until we come to do it later down the line. So overall, the 2025 selective test really showed us how quickly things are changing and evolving over time. From the online testing to unpredictable writing topics, and even how much the setup has really changed and can impact performance. The main thing though is control what you can control. Get familiar with the online format, build real exam habits, make sure that as a parent, that you're not throwing your child off. If your child is sitting the 2026 test, start early, stay consistent, follow the CSS framework as it's still very applicable, and prepare smart with the right resources. If you want some structure around that, our 10-week Selective Horizon program could be a great kickoff board for you to start off your preparation and to make sure that you are in a great place for that exam next year. If you're not doing that exam next year and you have a bit more time, then you could factor in what I've talked about in this video as well. If you agree or disagree with anything that I've mentioned, or you want me to talk about a topic, please put it down in the comments below. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.